Drafting a legal CV that actually converts and gets you to interview is a lot harder than it looks. There's so much that goes into getting it right. I've attended loads of CV workshops. I've redrafted my own CV 1,000,001 times, and I've modelled my own CV off people who have got the job and been successful in the interview process. And what I've learned through all of this is that there are little details that go into ensuring your CV is not scrapped at the selection process. Guys, it's nice to have you back on the channel. If you're new here, my name's Taz and I'm a future trial lawyer based in the UK. So the inspiration for this video came actually a few weeks ago. A law student reached out to me and asked if I would review their CV. And when I was doing it and I got stuck into the process, it transported me back to being a law student myself and just realizing, now I look back, how much I didn't know at the time, how much went into perfecting the CV to get to interview. I ate 1,000,001 rejections until I finally sent that CV off and it started coming back with an interview offer. So in this video, I'm going to ideally, the plan is, we together are going to compare a law student CV against a law graduate's. Spoiler alert, it's going to be my CV. We're going to compare the two so you guys can see the process. From the outset, I do want to just flag 3 very important rules that feed through any CV that it is you're going to write. And the first being this: how long should the CV actually be? There have been books written on this. Some people say 1 page, 2 page, 3 page, 4 page. What you need to know is that for an entry-level position, i.e. you're applying for a training contract or a pupillage, standard practice is 2 pages. Now, if you're not sure, you can always ask the specific organisation that you're applying to how many pages they want. But bear this point in mind. When people are reviewing CVs, that is unpaid work. No one wants to sit behind a desk reviewing a 4 or 5 page CV when there's a 2-pager there. Being a lawyer is all about being succinct. So the briefer that you can make it, the better it looks. So I'd always say, when in doubt, stick to 2 pages. The next thing is that you should always be tailoring your CV with respect to, firstly, the role, and then secondly, the actual organisation themselves. So with that said, if you are still undecided about whether you want to go down the solicitor or barrister route, I would recommend you should really have 2 CVs, and you should be using these CVs when you come to apply for VAC schemes and mini pupillages. Finally, this is the most important thing to remember, is that your CV is a flyer. It's a sales pitch as to why an organisation should hire you. So you always want to keep that at the forefront of your mind, because every line that you draft in the CV, you should be asking yourself, what's the purpose for why I'm including this? And the other thing to ask is, how is this serving me? How is this making me a better candidate for the role? Just want to say before we start, a big thank you to the law student who's actually let me critique their CV in this video. I have anonymized everything, and other than that, let's just get into it. Jane Doe's CV, here we are. Guys, we're going to critique this together. I'm going to do my best to make this video as orderly as possible. So the way this is going to look, I'm going to pull out some teething issues from the outset, and once I've done that, we will systematically go through each section of this CV. So the first thing I want to say, what stood out to me when I received this, before I'd read a line, was the template that they'd selected. Why? Because look, check. All their writing, essentially all their CVs on the left, and then there's 2 columns to this CV. This column is taking up 1/3 of the CV. Guys, there's nothing there. This is a cardinal sin. Space to be wasted like this is it's just a crime. Like, as I always say, every line on the CV matters. You should not be using 1/3 of the CV just for a few lines like this. Like, it needs, the template you do choose will ultimately be the foundation to your success. So choose wisely. Okay, so there isn't a right way to draft a CV. Everyone will have their own spin, everyone will bring their own creativity and different styles to the CV, but there's definitely a wrong way. There's fatal mistakes you want to avoid when drafting. And before we start, I'm going to just look at the structure of this CV and pass some comments. Now, this is just my view, it's not gospel, but ultimately it's my view for a reason, and I'm going to explain that to you. So if we look here, Jane Doe's got her name, then she's got a professional summary section, then the work history, education, and ending with references. And at the very top, we've also got the contact details on the top right, the skills section, and key achievements. So in terms of the structure, there are three things that I would remove. The first would be the professional summary section. Why? Because this essentially, they're going to get all they need to know about you from your work history, your academics, your extracurriculars, etc. So to have a section dedicated to essentially reiterating that is wasteful. So I'd get rid of the professional summary section. I'd also get rid of the skills section. Why? Again, because these skills, research skills, analytical skills, critical thinking, you're pulling these through in the work history section when you're speaking about your experiences. So having a section dedicated to it is just not efficient. And finally, I would definitely get rid of this reference section. Why? Because references are taken at the point that you've been given the job. So to dedicate CV real estate to it when you've not got the job, and the whole purpose of the CV is to get you to interview, you're better using that space for something which is going to improve your chances of getting you to interview, rather than something that they're going to do on an admin side after they've already given you the job. Let's talk about the layout of a CV. And I'm going to give you what I believe is the model layout, but I will discuss that layout ultimately is a tactical decision. So if we look at Jane Doe's CV, she's got work history, and then below work history, she's gone for education below work history. Now, typically, you would see it in reverse. You'd see education and then followed by the work history. But this can be useful. As I've said, CVs are about being tactical. So when I would do this is in a scenario where, let's say I don't have shining academics, but I've got really persuasive work experience, remembering that the whole purpose of the CV is to persuade the employer to give you an interview, to give you the opportunity to show that you can do the job, do it well. So in that scenario where my academics aren't great, but I've got great work experience, then yeah, I would put the work history first. But if you're someone who's got good academics and good work history, then I would probably recommend the following layout. I'd have the name at the very top, as we see here, then have the contact details below the name, the education, followed by your work or career history. I prefer the latter. I wouldn't call it legal experience, because this limits you essentially to talking about legal experience. You might have a lot of great experience which isn't legal experience, that you're hamstringing yourself, which you don't want to be doing. After work history or career history, I would have extracurricular activities, and I'd end with awards and achievements. Note that I say achievements and awards, or awards and achievements, rather than them separately. Why? Because essentially this section allows you to pull in things which you might not have tangible awards, right? Not everyone has awards, but when you're putting in achievements is subjective. And that wording allows you to bring something in which is you're proud of, it's an achievement to you. Obviously, you have to exercise this objective awareness. Your achievement has to be done on an objective backdrop. You know, you might have made a nice little cheesecake at the weekend, which you're really proud of, but there's probably no space for it in the CV. So always just be selective with what you're including in the achievements. So we've outlined the key sections of the CV, which are name, contact details, education, work history, extracurriculars, and then awards and achievements. And we're going to critique each of these sections in Jane Doe's CV together, starting off with the name. So as we can see here, I think this is just excessively large. The name doesn't need to be that big. Ideally, it is significant. I wouldn't say significantly smaller than this, because you want the name to be generally larger than the text in the CV. But equally not this big. So let's have a play around with that. Potentially, and let's see if I can, potentially, something like this is a bit more appropriate. You get the picture. Okay, next is contact details. So as we can see here are their contact details. Contact details should be on one line, preferably under the name. And in terms of what to include, I would say you want your email, as they've done here. You want a mobile number or a contact number. You want to include the city. Here it's blank, but the city, not your address, just the city where you're from. And then LinkedIn really is up to you. It's optional. Remember, if you've got a great LinkedIn and you've got a lot of contacts, that is persuasive to a prospective employer because it shows a lot of things. It shows that you are a sociable person, you're good at making connections can transfer to business relations, etc., etc. So if you have it and you want to include it, it's up to you. You don't have to include it, and nor should you feel pressured to include it. But for me, I would include the contact details somewhere here under the name on one line. What not to include, in my opinion, I wouldn't include a photo. The legal sector is just not there. You know, this isn't the tech sector. You're not a graphic designer. It's not the graphic design world. This is the legal world. They are more traditional. And from speaking to a range of different firms, a range of different employers, they don't tend to like photos. So I wouldn't include it. And I think your CV should talk for itself without your face being on there. In terms of education, I would have, as they've done here, they've got their most recent qualification at the top and their oldest qualification at the bottom. And so, for example, let's say you have a PhD, your PhD at the top, your master's below, your Bachelor of Laws below that, then your A-levels and your GCSEs. For each qualification, what I would include is the qualification itself, as we see here, Bachelor of Laws. If you've done it with French or criminology, I'd put colon, law and criminology after. Then I would include the institution, as they've done here, Sheffield Hallam University. I'd include the years where you actually attended this school, so something like 2013 to 2016. And then I would put your grades here. They've put expected. This is what you do if you're let's say a third year law student and you're waiting for your grades, then yeah, I've put them here. I like what they've done here where they've grouped them. I would recommend doing this as well, where they've put 11 GCSEs, A star to C. I don't think this is necessary, including English and maths. For your A levels, again, I'd do what they've done here, where they haven't grouped them. They've just named them individually: physics, maths, chemistry. But again, I would try and get the A levels onto one line if possible. We're going to go through their work history section together. From the outset, I'd say that for each experience, here, their first experience, they were a teacher, and the third, 2022, for Teach Academy in Birmingham. What I would include for each experience you're going to name are the dates when you did that experience. Like they've done here, you don't need to include the specific date. Just including the month and the year is sufficient. I'd include the role that you did, teacher, as we see here, the institution, and then the city where you did that. The first thing I'd say here is that I feel like this flow is a bit unnatural, how they've got the role, the institution either side, and then they've got the date breaking them up. I would swap this around. I would move the date away and let this flow naturally. So I'd probably put the date on the left and then I'd swap these two around. I'm going to walk through this experience. So they were a teacher for Teach Academy in Birmingham. The first bullet point says tailored teaching styles to tutor students with special education needs. The second bullet point says provided support for students preparing for the 11th entrance exams to achieve admissions into their chosen grammar or private school, and then taught students remotely through live video sessions on Zoom. The first point I want to flag, it's not a main point, it's a style point that they've put here after special education needs, SEN. I'm going to briefly just scan through this CV to see if I can see SEN. I have a feeling that I won't be able to find it. Put it down in the comments if I've missed it. But the point that I'm trying to make is I can't see it anywhere. And the point is, to come full circle on this, is that if you're not going to include it, if you're not going to refer to SEN anywhere else in the CV, then don't include the bracket. Just get rid of it. The principal point that I wanted to mention, the reason why I read those 3 bullet points out, is because this is a classic law student mistake. And it's a classic mistake because when you're trying to write down or draft your work history or describe it in experience, you think, well, I'm trying to show the reader exactly what I did in that time. So you think I'm just going to describe everything. But that is the first fatal flaw, because if they just see description, it's going straight in the bin, because what they're looking to see, and I'm going to write these out here, so feel free to pause the video and take notes of these. The first thing they're looking to see is what you did, which they have done here. They've just explained what they did, right? What you did, or what did you see? Okay? Now, the second thing they're looking for is, excuse the infant style handwriting, it's not my best, is what did you learn? Okay, now what you learned could have been a skill, a perspective, or just a lesson. And finally, how does it relate to the job that you're applying for? It needs to be relevant. So I would pause the video and I would make a note of these three things because they're very relevant to the CV application process. I know I found this really difficult. Something that a lot of, it doesn't even have to be a law student, anyone drafting a CV, what they find difficult and what I found difficult was drawing the line between including something and not including it. Why? Because you've done it and you've spent a lot of time doing it, you're emotionally connected to it. So you just want to show everything. But your job is to take a step back and ask yourself, does this contribute to making me a better candidate? Does this have a purpose as to why I'm including it, or am I just including it? And you should do that for every line in the CV. I keep drilling this point. I think people struggle with understanding where the line is with what or what not to include in the CV. Disconnect emotionally from your experience, because yes, you've done loads of things, great, but that doesn't necessarily mean it warrants a line on the CV, and you should make that assessment objectively. If I'm applying for pupillage and I want to be a barrister, then the purpose of this work experience section is to demonstrate that I have the skills to be a barrister, the potential to be a barrister, and the reason I'm including this is to evidence that. So if I was to redraft this teacher experience for that role, if I was applying to be a barrister, then every experience that I'm including in the CV needs to be evidencing why I have the skills necessary to do pupillage. Why am I a good candidate for you to take me into chambers? So if I was to redraft this experience, the teacher experience, for the role of a barrister, I would say something like this. As a teacher, I was responsible for delivering classes which prepared students for their entrance examinations to secure admissions into their chosen grammar school. During my time in this role, I significantly developed my oral communication skills by simplifying complex material into easy to digest information which could be readily understood by children. Note here that I'm not necessarily going to explicitly say that these are the skills needed to be a barrister, but I know that the reader is someone in chambers, and someone in chambers knows that those skills that I've just described are the same skills that a barrister needs to exercise when communicating information to a jury. So implicitly, I've written that section knowing that the reader understands this is why I'm a good fit for chambers. We've been through everything together, okay? In terms of what did you see or do? What lessons did you learn? Why is it relevant? Let's apply that to this line. Taught students remotely through live video sessions on Zoom. Look, this line really isn't adding anything. It's not saying anything. It's just ultra descriptive. If we break it up, you taught students remotely. Okay, well, you've not really explained what you learned in that, what skills did you gain, etc. It's just a blanket descriptive statement. And here, through live video sessions on Zoom, there's essentially two implicit points in here that they're trying to make, that they're able to teach students and the skills that are required to teach students, and then they've learned the skills that are actually quite beneficial in today's world with us moving into an online world, a lot of people working from home these days, etc. So there is value here, but they haven't explained explicitly why it's valuable, because if a reader, i.e. your future employer, is reading this is just, it's a line that didn't need to be included. So if you are going to include it, be very intentional as to why you're including it and explicitly what you are trying to draw out from this bullet point. Okay, don't worry, we're not going to go through every single experience. I've been through them and I'm going to pull out what I believe are the key points. So here, let's have a look at this. They've got Leeds Law School, okay? and then they've got peer mentor. The problem is that they've fused the institution with the role, and then they've got the institution Leeds Beckett University here. Yes, Leeds Law School is within Leeds Beckett University, but there's no need to double drop the institution twice. Now, the second point I want to raise is, look, if we see here peer mentor, and then we come down to work placement. So as we can see, the W and the P here are capitalized. So essentially, there's an inconsistency with how they're drafting the role. So keep things consistent. Don't be inconsistent, because this is a telltale, very important point to whether it's law firms or chambers is, as a lawyer, your ability to exercise attention to detail, and here they've missed it. Finally, just a couple things to flag here, guys. Ensured participants' comfort by providing a warm welcome to Leeds Law Schools and conducting one-to-one meetings to discuss the needs and concerns of first-year students. Okay, this part here, conducting one-to-one meetings, this is arguably emotional intelligence, interpersonal skills, so yes, it has a purpose in the CV. But providing a warm welcome, you know, a 5-year-old can give a warm welcome. It has no place in the CV. We need to axe this, and it all comes into why are we including things. Now, you might think I'm being harsh and overly critical, but I'm not. We need to have the standard up here for things that we include, and providing a warm welcome as a reader or a potential future employer. The first thing I'd be thinking is they've included it. Remember, you always lead with your most persuasive point first. That should be your first bullet point, your most persuasive one. So if their first bullet point is talking about a warm welcome, I'm thinking they don't really have much to talk about. The second point I wanted to flag is here they say promoted social inclusion by leading social activities, etc. We want to be writing in the first person. That is very important. I used to write exactly how they've written, which is promoted. I think it's just easier because sometimes you don't think I. Equally, you don't want the sentence always to be I. You need to diversify your sentence structure. But yes, law firms, chambers, they want to see first person. Some final points so we can wrap up the work experience section. But the first thing to note is that they've not even included a date here for this experience, another inconsistency. So we need to be consistent. This section goes on to talk about a civil litigation case. I spent the morning with Judge Doe on a civil litigation case. That tells the reader nothing. You want to be explicitly clear. Include the details. What did you do? Why is it relevant? What did you learn from it? What skills did you take? What insights did you gain? Just saying a civil litigation case, well, you might as well not have included it. Do mention that they reviewed case files and other legal documents, but note that this is on a separate bullet point. So I'm not making the connection as the reader that the reviewed case files link to this civil litigation case. For me, they're completely two separate matters. For the next work experience, just a couple quick points. So make sure that the actual title of what you did there is correct. Here they've done a work placement at 6 St John's Street Chambers in London. Normally, I haven't seen a work placement in chambers. They're normally described as mini pupilages. I could be wrong. And the second point is there's also a little cheeky name drop here, QC Mark Hubbard. Now, it's not wrong to do that. It's not wrong to name drop. But again, this goes back to the tactics. I don't include names unless it's serving a purpose. Where the purpose would be, let's say I'm applying to a specific chambers in Manchester, then yes, I would include the name of the barristers or the judges that are reviewed who are on circuit, because that would be of interest to the place where you're applying. But if I'm applying to chambers in Leeds and I've done experience in Manchester at different chambers, the chambers in Leeds don't care about what the names of the barristers are called in Manchester. So just keep that point in mind. We have teacher here, as we've seen, for Teach Academy. And then towards the bottom, we've got two more experiences, teacher for teacher group and tutor for developed learning. The point here is that if we can diversify the work experience on the CV, great. I know we don't choose what experience that we have. If you're just going into law school, I would be mindful, try and get the most diverse experience that you can. But also consider that on the face of some of your experience, it might not look like worthy of including in the CV. But I would look at experiences through the lens of what skills can I draw out of this which are relevant to the role. And when you start looking at experience like that, all of a sudden it can become relevant. Finally, I'm going to comment on their key achievements section and the additional skills and qualifications. So if we take the key achievements, this really stood out to me a lot, was the fact that they've included expert badges on Word. Again, this goes back to being selective. For me, this is telling me that they don't actually have that many achievements to include if they are, the first line in their achievement section is that they're talking about badges. The reality, the harsh reality is employers don't care about badges. They don't care about, let's say, we just go down here, they don't care about a Westlaw certificate. That's all garbage to a future employer. What they do care about is what they have here, where they speak 2 languages fluently. This is very important. This is very relevant. So, and here again, their grades, that they've achieved a really high mark in one of their units. These are things of relevance. Be selective in what you're including in your key achievements. Now that we've been through the law student CV, let's go through my CV together. But before we do, I want to make this really clear. My CV wasn't drafted overnight. It has been through 1,000,001 revisions. And it used to be a guaranteed rejection. I used to send that thing out, know it was a rejection. Now it's a guaranteed interview. And I don't say that with arrogance, I say that with confidence, because it has been through so much. I've been through so much where I understand what the reader is looking to see. And you don't need the best grades, all the awards, the best experience to get to interview. You just need to know how to play the cards in your deck. In the end, this CV contributed to getting my pupillage. So let's go through it together. The first thing is the name. It's a lot smaller than the other one, and it's proportionate to the actual text. Note that I've actually dropped the language here because, as I've said previously, if you are bilingual, it is something that a future employer might be looking for. But equally, if you'll notice here, I've also included the scholarship, which should be reserved for the achievements section. But the reason I've included both of these here, because I want these things to be the very first thing that the person reading the CV is going to see. So I've got the city, my number, my email, I've included this, and then we've got my education section. So pretty much as I've outlined, what's the degree, the university, and then the grade. I've taken out all personal data, and then we've got the dates up here, top left, 2019 to 2020, just going down, 2016, 2017, 2013, neatly on the left-hand side. So the next section is career history. We're going to go through that in a moment, and then after work history or career history, we go to extracurricular activities and awards and achievements. We're not going to go through all the career history. I've just pulled one out for us to go through together. Here are the dates on the left. You don't need to include the day. You can just have the month and the year. We've got the role here, and then we've got the chambers and the location. I've included UK because some of my experience is US and Australia. So it's just to make that distinction that it's outside the UK. So remember what we spoke about before. We said, what did you see? What did you learn? And why is it relevant? So let's just go through this one. I say that I drafted an opinion for an airline company. That is what I did. The assignment was beneficial in serving as a reminder to exercise caution when making assumptions without supporting evidence. That is what I learned. Implicitly, that's equally why it's relevant to being a barrister. And then I talk about the next section, that I was invited to cross-examine a witness to practice my advocacy skills. This was explicitly saying what I did and what the experience I gained from it. But then here you'll see, I'll say what I took away from the exercise was that there's a fine balance between being emotionally considerate of a witness and befriending them during cross-examination. Again, I'm drilling what I learned at the very end. Here you'll notice that I haven't actually used bullet points. I've just used full sentences, a paragraph, and that's because I was advised to do that by multiple people. This isn't one person's opinion. My old CV used to be full of bullet points, but over time I realized that chambers and firms prefer to see your writing style, essentially. So now I use them extremely in a limited fashion. If you see here in the awards and achievements, I've got them here, for example, published in Lincoln's Inn Student Law Journal, Volume 3, but it makes sense to use it here because it's just pure description. The extracurricular activities, you'll see my section is actually really small. That's done on purpose in that I did have a lot more I could include, but I wanted my work experience section to be as full and as comprehensive as it could be. So I took the hit on the extracurriculars. Your situation might be different. You might have really stunning extracurriculars. So that's it. It's a case by case basis. What I will say is that if you've got something interesting like fire dancing, skiing, whatever it is, always include it in the extracurriculars because that's just, it jumps off the page, it grabs the eyes, and it will definitely be brought up at interview. For the extracurriculars, you'll see that the way I've done it is what's the role, what's the competition that I was in or the event, and then I've put the institution where it was relevant to. For me, the extracurriculars, they are extracurriculars, they are just that. So I'm very cautious how much real estate I give them in the CV. Again, you'll see debater, the Debating Shield competition. Lincoln's in. I participated in the debate acting as the Deputy Prime Minister. One line, it doesn't need any more than that. Finally, the awards and achievements section. I just want to say two things. The first is that you'll see here BPTC Scholarship, Droop Scholarship by Lincoln's Inn. I know where this CV is going, that the people who are reading the CV will know what that is. But if you're including a scholarship where the reader is unlikely to understand what that scholarship is, I'd include some detail as to what it is, why it was awarded. Some people also include that they were potentially one of 3 people to win it. And the last thing to say is always have the date included on when you achieved an award. Thought it would be useful to end having them side by side. So on the left, we have Jane Doe, the Law Student's CV. If you can see the name, the size of the name compared to the size of my name, as I mentioned, that is significantly larger. But I'm just going to scroll through it one final time, just so you can get a bird's eye view of the difference. And also, please note that this CV is on the left, it's 3 pages. And then finally, on the right, here's my CV, 2 pages. That you can see, you get a good feel for the length of the work experience section, and then I wrap it up with extracurriculars and awards. To summarize, let's look at some do's and don'ts. So for the do's, be tactical in the way you present your story. Draft your work experience according to what you saw or you did, what you learned, and why it was relevant. Choose your template wisely. Ask yourself for every line, what's its purpose and why does this make me a better candidate? Be considerate of the way you capitalize roles and display dates. Write in the first person and diversify your skills and experience. For the don'ts, don't have a personal summary section, don't have a reference section or a skills section. Don't include a photo or be solely descriptive. Don't name drop without a reason. Don't repeat yourself. And don't include everything. Remember to be selective. I really do hope this video has been useful. Please let me know down in the comments below. And other than that, guys, you know what it is. See you at the next one.